This is the Brew World Order Podcast.
Welcome to the Brew World Order Podcast. My name is Mike Curtin. If you haven't subscribed yet, why not? Give it a shot. Doesn't hurt. This is episode number 24, and in this episode, I sit down with Justin Steinberg and Matthew Brodsky of Sacred Vice Brewing Company in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. These two cousins tell me how they're dealing with the pandemic, how they got their name, and the story about how their Sunday family gatherings turned into homebrewing days that had ultimately led them to open their brewery. They may be open in the city of brotherly love, but let me tell you, these two cousins got along so well during the interview, they might as well be brothers. As corny as that may seem, I still think you should listen to the interview because it's way better than that joke. So, sit back, crack open a beer, and enjoy the podcast. Hey guys, I'm Mike Curtin. This is the Brew World Order Podcast, and today I'm with Justin Steinberg and Matthew Brodsky of Sacred Vice Brewing Company in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Cousins Justin and Matt's families would meet every Sunday for breakfast or to watch their beloved Eagles play. On Christmas, Justin gave Matt a book about the history of Philadelphia. The book had also talked about the history of the brewing industry in Philly. Not too long after, while having drinks at a local jazz club, Matt and Justin decided to start homebrewing. From there on, every Sunday became a brew day that started in Matt's kitchen, that slowly got pushed to the outside deck of their home, that slowly turned into them having to lease a space in July of 2016 that would become known as Sacred Vice Brewing Company. Justin and Matt, thank you for being with me.
Yep, thanks for having us, Michael.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you.
So, just real quick, you opened in 2018, correct?
Yeah, it was like December 2018. We opened our doors to the public.
Right. So you opened for about a year before this whole COVID situation hit?
That's correct.
How much of a shock was that, and how did you adjust? How'd you go about adjusting?
I'll jump in here, too. So it was the one thing that we looked back and laughed at was incredibly prescient or timely, whatever word you want to use. We had purchased right at the end of last year. We had a little extra money lying around that we had to use, and we were like always wanting to get a small manual canning machine. Right. So we had purchased that right at the turn of the new year. So we had that. It's literally sat in a box for the first 3 months of the year. But once the pandemic started to hit and things got real, and we realized everything was going to need to shut down for the safety of everybody, we whipped that canning machine out and certainly learned to use it real quick. And there was a real quick pivot for us, and we were certainly grateful that we had it and didn't know what to expect, being able to just then sling cans safely from our loading dock one day a week. But it's worked out, and we're certainly grateful that we're still able to go and, give some people some beer and do it safely.
Right.
Yeah, it was a bit of a, as everybody experienced, a bit of a heady time when COVID first struck, and I think at first we were kind of resigned to basically just shut down and weather the storm. But then in Pennsylvania, the governor had, I don't know if he did it on purpose or not, but he had designated breweries as essential businesses.
Right.
So, after we talked a lot about it, and kind of just kept an eye on what other breweries were doing, and we figured out a way to open and be really safe about curbside pickups. We were like, you know what, let's give it a go. And one of the things we did, I don't know if it was to salve our conscience or what, but since we've been selling during COVID, every week we people want to give us tips when they pick up or when online when they buy beer, and so we decided don't give us tips. If you're going to give us tips, we're going to give that money directly to a charity every week, and we're going to match every dollar of that charity. So when we first opened up, a lot of the charities, as you might expect, were COVID related. Giving local restaurants money to deliver food to healthcare providers, or helping the less fortunate in the city of Philadelphia cope with COVID. And then some of the charities kind of pivoted to being more about Black Lives Matter and all those race matters issues that kind of came up. And then just last week, we started asking our customers what charities they wanted us to collect money for. And so we did make a wish last week. So I think that's a big part of what we've been doing since COVID is really kind of, me personally, I still feel a little uncomfortable being open while, there's so much suffering out there. And, but what kind of makes me feel better about it is, one, I think people like to get out and go buy beer and drink beer during COVID. So I think we're playing a little bit of a public service there, but also because we're giving money to charity, I think that's a cool aspect of us being open too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really awesome of you guys to do something like that. I mean, pass it on down the line.
Yeah. I think it'd be one thing, Michael, if we had employees and we give the, obviously all those tips would go to our employees, but it's just me and Justin. So it's like, look, we don't, not to say we couldn't use the money, but I think it could be better spent by giving it to local charities.
Really? So right now you have no employees, or you'll have like just a select few, or?
We've never had employees.
Really? Wow.
It's always been just the two of us doing every little bit of everything.
So I know a lot of people have like, they have their brewery and then they have their actual job, and like the brewery is almost like a side job. Do you, either of you have a job on the side, or is like this is it?
No, we most certainly do have we have both. We have careers ourselves. And
My God.
all brewing dreams, certainly it's what we both call, what I call a passion project, and it's developing into something and rather quickly.
Right.
Because Matthew might say not quick enough, but it's certainly, COVID didn't help that, but
right.
We do have other gigs, and from the get-go, from the very beginning, it's just been the two of us sharing the brewing responsibilities from, washing kegs, developing recipes, serving the beer in the tasting room when it was open, and certainly, selling cans safely from the loading dock now.
Michael, speaking of other jobs, just let's be on the record and say, like, we're doing this interview not between 9 and 5, because technically...
Yeah, exactly. You both have families? Are you both married, or?
Justin's swinging single, but I have a family. I got a wife and 3 kids.
Okay,
2 dogs, 2 cats.
Gotty. So
not for me yet, Michael. Not yet for me.
All right, from the family standpoint, how is it to balance that? And like, even if I know from myself from trying to balance. I mean, I don't have a business personally, but I can imagine that having a business and then having side jobs can be a little bit hectic. How do you guys go about balancing all that?
I just have a lot of guilt all the time.
I hear that loud and clear.
Speaking for me, I don't have a family. I certainly don't. Like I'm always incredibly impressed with Matthew juggling, sacred vice duties, having his gig that he has incredible responsibilities for, but also then obviously the biggest responsibility, having children to take care of and a wife to be a good partner to. So that's certainly different than what I have. I do have another business that is my own, so it's been fun juggling and being an entrepreneur with 2 different businesses.
Right.
I know for the first year it was fun, like working almost 7 days a week. Recently I've been trying to take Sundays off just to at least have it a day from time to time to recharge, but that certainly becomes a brew day, and I was brewing this Sunday. But it's all fun for sure.
Right. How important is a mental break for both of you?
For me, I didn't realize how important I think that was and how much better I performed at either job or just in life in general with having some time to yourself to, shut down, whether you read or just take time to yourself, get outside, do something for your own mental well-being. That's certainly important, and I think I was taking that for granted for quite some time.
Right.
Yeah, I just learned to maximize the little mental break times that I get here and there, like the car ride from the brewery to my house.
You don't get any mental breaks, man.
That 25 minutes is like precious, So I take advantage of those little spots when I get them.
Right. I know some people advise against it. What would you guys say are the ups and downs of being in business with family? Don't hold back.
We're very close cousins. Like I don't have a brother. Matthew does have a brother, our other cousin. And growing up, me and my 2 sisters, Matthew, his brother and sister, the 6 of us we're very close, spending every single summer together, and obviously spending those early Sundays
Right.
through even the winter months together. I don't have a brother. The closest thing I do have would be Matthew. So we certainly argue and fight like brothers sometimes. It'd be funny in the tasting room on a Saturday, our customers getting to watch us argue like brothers about the stupidest, silliest stuff. So It can be frustrating at times, but it's also, to me, rewarding just because of the shared past, of knowing each other so well and knowing when certain things are serious or not serious. And I don't know, that familial connection is, I think, I love it.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we mostly communicate by text, so I think it's kind of I think that limits a lot of the collateral damage of.
Agreed.
So by the time we get it and we're both working together in the brewery together, whether it's when we're canning or selling on Saturdays or the rare occasion brewing together. We have some lively discussions, but I don't really think there's, at least knock on wood, we haven't experienced really the downsides of being family and working together, just because not that we think alike, but I kind of know how he thinks, and I can anticipate, like, okay, if I come up with this idea, like, it's probably going to make him really upset, so let's come up with this idea and see what happens.
Right.
And vice versa.
Just vibing off of each other, kind of, huh?
For sure.
Yeah. So, what is something you never thought you were going to have to deal with in this industry?
I think one thing that surprised me is just how good everybody is. Like you kind of go into it, and it's it's going to be a crowded field. Even when we started 4 years ago, it was crowded, and it's only gotten even more crowded. But what surprised me is, okay, everybody's obviously, there's not a lot of people who make really, really super awesome, fantastic, like world-class beer, but there's a lot of people making excellent beer and good beer.
Right.
And on top of that, there's a lot of breweries, even if they're not making good beer, they're really good at marketing it. And getting out there, and that to me surprised me, like just how good the marketing is out there, and how good some breweries are in terms of building their community and their fan base, and really kind of having loyal followings of people that will buy their beer no matter what they put out.
Right.
One thing that surprised me, because I certainly went into the decision to go this route blind, and we both didn't know what to expect. But when we first opened a tasting room, it's hard to go and describe over a podcast, obviously, but the space itself, it's not in the best neighborhood in Philadelphia. It's certainly a very old, dilapidated building, a building with character. But creating this tasting room in this tiny little space where literally our little brew house is 15 feet away, we only had a little small 8-person seat bar. We didn't know if anybody was going to show up, if we'd have customers of any kind. It was very much a crapshoot,
right? And
not knowing what to expect. And I think we were overwhelmed with the way people fell in love with the space, and hopefully a little bit the beer and us, and what little thing we created through that first year prior to 2020. So I was most surprised that we were able to create something that had some traction and that certainly people connected with.
Right. So I'm sure you've met many people in the beer industry as of now. Who do you think inspired you guys the most?
That's definitely a Justin question.
To speak recently, just because it's top of mind, so I just got back recently from a little trip, a family trip down to Asheville, North Carolina.
Okay.
And certainly wherever I travel, whether it's in the country or throughout the world, the two things I'm always looking for are where the record shops and what beer is being made locally.
Right.
So getting to go and visit a bunch of breweries down in Asheville, that served as an inspiration. And I've been intrigued recently with just the beer that's being made by people who have basically farm breweries, legit farm breweries, where they're growing a ton of their own ingredients, whether it even be the fruits that they're using to make certain beers. So, I was thrilled even getting to go to Fontaflora's brewery down in Nebo, North Carolina, on their farm. That was something that was just eye-opening in the way that they approach the entire beer-making process and the beer that they're making.
Right.
Yeah, but even locally back up to even in the Philly region too, we're lucky to have a little small network of some much larger breweries than us, and it's great just to be able to go and bounce ideas off of. I don't have professional brewing experience. I mean, Matt doesn't either, so I do enjoy getting to have certain conversations where I get to bounce ideas or learn some things, just because that's part of the education part that's I'm lacking in.
So before, you were talking about your tap room and the size of it, and you weren't sure if people were going to show up. I was looking at pictures online, and the ambiance, the decor of it, who chose that? Is very, I don't know, it's very not brewery looking. I don't know.
That's the sweetest thing you've ever said to me, Michael. I don't know you that well.
Right, yes.
It's music to my
ears. I think it's very cool. It's very.
I did not like.
It's very loungy looking, which
they're comfortable. It's like a living room, a bar and a living room is what we kind of like to say.
Okay.
But one thing, if I could just chime in and start there, it's one thing I personally didn't like a lot about a lot of breweries you get to visit across the country or across the world is a lot just have this large industrial feel, and I get it. They're breweries. They're meant to make beer, and maybe sometimes the tasting room itself and the experience somebody has is, an afterthought. Right. So there was certainly something that mattered to us, and knowing where we are and the size that we were, we knew we wanted to do something different. But the actual look and feel was kind of more of an organic collaboration between both of us, not knowing the direction we wanted to go in. And if I could pass the baton to you there, Matt, I mean, wrap that up too with how we decorated and what we did with the space.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we have in there was taken from the house or the homes of folks from our family. So our grandparents' house or my dad's house, Justin's house that he grew up in. So a lot of the stuff in there, even though it kind of, in a way, it's kind of an old lady's living room vibe.
Right.
There's meaning to most everything in there, whether it's a lamp, certainly all the pictures that we have up on the wall, those are all our relatives, whether we knew them or they're second, third, fourth generation ancestors. So we don't know who they are, but we found the picture under our grandmother's bed, so we know it has to be somebody important. So we have them up there. But I think it kind of evolved that way. It suits the space. It's this big old warehouse, big old looking building. It wasn't actually a warehouse. It used to be like a textile mill. And so it's this beat up old building that's over 100 years old. And you come into our space and it's like, an old lady's living room. And it just kind of goes. I mean, Justin and I, when we first opened, we had a lot of back and forth about, okay, do we need to get high tables and, have more space for people to be able to socialize, and we kind of voted against it. We kind of kept pushing in the direction of, okay, let's get couches and comfy chairs, and it's worked. And you got the music playing, and anybody can go up and put a record on, and I think people. The experience that, just going by what people have told us, and they might be blowing hot air at us, but we've had enough people tell us this, that there's got to be some truth to it. But people come in, they don't know what to expect. They come in, they get a beer, they sit down, expecting to have one beer, and 5-6 beers later, they're there for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and they're they just didn't leave because they got so comfortable in the space.
Yeah, it's definitely got a cool vibe to it, for sure. So that leads to my next question. How did you guys come up with the name for your brewery?
Yeah, you want to take that, Justin?
Sure. I've given this one a few times, Tim, and I think Matt probably laughs at me each time we say it. Sacred Vice. So, I mean, like you had mentioned right in the intro, and like we talked about a couple of times, growing up, Sunday was a special day. Not that our families were particularly religious, but our family was our religion, so to speak. And we, every single Sunday, would get together and just spend family time together, sharing meals, watching sports, whatever time of the year it was, doing something together. And certainly that traveled over to Sunday becoming our brew day when we first started home brewing. And even once we got kicked out of Matthew's house and started brewing there in the space that became Sacred Vice. When we started, it was both us still together every single Sunday. We now had to divide and conquer just to be able to make more beer over the course of a week. But Sunday was a special day. That was the sacred part to us. Sundays were sacred. Right. And as for Vice, I mean, I haven't been in a shit ton of trouble in my life. But if I've ever been in a little trouble, you better believe that beer's been involved. And I don't have many vices, but I'd say beer might be one of them if I had to say that. So that would be Sacred Vice.
All right. So
yeah, it's certainly a vice. Sorry to cut you off, Mike.
No worries. Go ahead.
Beer is certainly a vice for Justin. Don't let him do that.
It's definitely a vice for me as well. My whole fridge could tell the story. So how do you both define success in your own minds, and was there a defining moment for you that you knew you guys were doing really well?
Justin and I probably have different definitions of success.
Right, as most people do. Right?
Yeah. Like not that I expect to like grow the business in a couple of years and sell out for, $100 million. Not that that's happening anymore, but if it were possible, that's not necessarily my definition of success. But I do want to try to grow it into a sustainable, long-term brewery business, and so that would mean moving into a bigger space, getting a bigger, more economically viable system. And actually having employees and, having it be a real, not that we don't have a real live brewery business now, but I think you kind of know what I mean, like something that can be open almost every day of the week, and serve all different styles of beer, distribute to, bars we like to distribute to in the Philly and surrounding areas. And I think we're somewhat limited in being able to do that now just because of our time constraints and our, a half barrel system that we have. So,
right.
So to me, that would be the definition of success.
Yeah. And for the record, I agree with everything that the Cuz just said there. Right. I truly, truly do. And that certainly would be one measure of success, and then certainly that's, I think, that would be success on the macro level. Taking things back and looking at it more micro from a different vantage point, I started to feel some success when people would come back and bring friends, and it happens more often than not, or at least it did when we were open.
Right.
I still get thrilled even Saturdays when we have brand new customers coming up just to come and try our beer, because we are incredibly tiny, certainly hidden, and we're not out there as much. So I think a lot of our local market still doesn't really know that much about us. So I get thrilled and just get really, jazzed over new customers coming and finding us. And certainly success early on for me when we had the tasting room was the repeat customers bringing their friends, family members, just to come and share an experience with us.
So I always ask this question, and me and my cousin, who are really close, always seem to have this question, but what was your gateway beer into the craft beer world?
I love this question.
Me too. It's always interesting to hear.
Yeah. Matt, you go first, bud.
Yeah, so I'm going to show my age here. But I went to school up in upstate New York, and there was a bar down the street from where I live called Chapter House. It's since burned down. I'm not sure if they built it back up, but it was just like the beer bar in town. When you got to be 21, because they were really hard carders, when you got to be 21, that's the first bar you went to if you liked beer. So I'd go there, and it'd be like a Saranac, Black Forest, or for some reason they might even have had Sierra Nevada back in the day in there.
Really?
But it was and craft beer wasn't called craft beer. I don't even know if it was called microbreweries back then. It was just okay, here's something different than PBR and Natty Light.
Right.
And so it was I hate to admit it, I think it was Saranac was my gateway drug into draft beer.
Right.
Yeah, for me, certainly the first beer that opened my eyes to something that wasn't just macro lager was and Matt, you said it too, was Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, which I think is a lot of people's. Certainly still one of my favorite beers to drink, having not being able to drink them as much. But I remember having those early on in, I hate to admit it, but probably high school, whether it be going to concerts and trying that, and that was eye-opening. But I'd also add in, I remember the first summer I had some older friends, and still I probably shouldn't be saying this, but still in a junior or senior in high school. And my one friend came back from Westchester University, which isn't far from Victory, and brought back, I remember Hop Devil and tasting that for the first time. And that, I vividly remember drinking that in my backyard and being like, wow, that's a totally different world of flavor than some of the other beers.
Yeah. Hop
If
Devil's
could-
amazing. I love that beer.
Yeah. Justin's story reminded me, like, when I moved back to Philly in, like, 2003, 2004, and, you get back to the whole idea of the history of the Philly beer scene. Like, when I moved back then, like, Yardz was just starting to get all over the place in the city, and that Yardz, Yardz Pale Ale, to me, is also, like, just a classic, at least regionally around here. Like, it just...
Right.
Kind of took over the city, took it away from Yingling Lager. Like, it used to be a lager town, and then it became a Philly Pale Ale town.
Gotcha, yeah. I know Yardz has just become a monster in Philly. Now, I don't see a lot of Yardz in New York, to be honest with you.
I don't think they're in New York.
Yeah? Really?
Believe it or not.
I've had their stuff before. I've had their stuff
Mm-hmm.
before, but I hear that there's just a monster in Philly, so that's... And I hear they're amazing, so I'm definitely down to try some more of their stuff. What advice would you give to somebody that wanted to open their own brewery?
If I had to say anything, it's work from a recipe standpoint, work on your classics. It's still something that we go back to, and we both tend to drink a lot of, I think, and we like a lot. And don't get me wrong, we're all over the place with the different styles of beer we make and like to drink.
Right.
But being able to really hone in a few recipes with some classic styles, which certainly aren't going to pay your bills and put money in the bank or maybe even butts in the seats, but it's going to certainly help you start to go and branch out with the development of recipes for other more popular styles. But having a good core understanding of the backbone of those recipes, it's something I specifically learned from Matthew. With just being able to really hone in and dial in with some classic styles. That's something that I think every brewer, whether you're a home brewer or venturing into the world of having your own brewery, that's something that they need as a tool in their pocket.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I guess I just threw out one thing and be like, when you're figuring out if you want to do it, I think the question to ask yourself, besides all the other standard business questions, would be like, what's new? Like, what you can bring to the table? Because what is there, like 8,000 breweries now? And if you're going into a market like Philadelphia, where there's so many already, it's like, what's going to be different about you? Like, what value you're going to bring? Like, why are people going to want to drink what you produce? Like, is it going to just be another hazy or another fruit bomb that you're going to produce? Not to say that those aren't worth bringing to the market, but I think you got to kind of know what your niche is going to be, and not to say that can't change over time, but you certainly want to kind of enter the market knowing what you're doing.
And if I could chime in there too at the end, because it just comes to my mind too, I would also, along those same lines, tell somebody, as much as obviously at the end of the day you're a brewery, the beer is what's most important, but take a little time to really think about what a person's experience is going to be when they come to visit you and choose you to go spend a couple of hours of their weekend or during the week to have a few beers. Create the experience for them too. The beer matters, but so much more matters when somebody comes to go and drink that beer in a certain environment amongst other people and in a space. That space matters. Curate that and certainly spend a little time thinking about what the experience is going to entail.
Yeah, right. I talk about that with my buddy all the time when you talk about honing in recipes. I was like, I feel like that's exactly what like Montauk did, because I'm like, Montauk doesn't have like a huge selection, but they have those certain beers. I don't know if you're familiar with Montauk Brewing.
I'm honestly not. I don't think I've had a beer by Montauk.
So like they just, I mean, they're all over New York now, but like they have just like a certain amount of beers, and they're all very tasty. And like I feel like that's what they did. They like perfected their recipes and just like, all right, we're just gonna put out these beers and no like crazy special beers every so often. They just, and everybody loves their stuff. So did you guys happen to have a funny story for us?
Yeah. I mean, I could. We talked about a few. The one that still makes me shake my head every single time is so. We got that space in 2016. We decided to buy our little pilot system. We ripped that thing off the pallet that it came on, put it together to the best of our knowledge just by looking at the way it was supposed to be put together. Didn't even look at the instructions, didn't watch any YouTube videos, didn't do anything at all, and just expected to be able to go and plug this thing in, toss our ingredients in, and brew a beer like as if we were brewing outside or in Matt's kitchen. And that first time, you better believe it, 2 hours later, we were dumping everything right out. You know, spent grain, or what was not even spent grain at that point in time, out into the grass out front of our brewery. But it shocks me that we had this system that cost not the most expensive system in the world, but was not cheap either. And we just expected to go and just dump stuff in, didn't look at instructions, didn't know how to go and run this thing. And we thought that was gonna go and work. And I shake my head at myself every single time now. And I learned from that point forward to go and actually spend some time learning how a machine works before you go and try to go and start something. Right. So it's maybe only funny to me just because I look at what an idiot that I felt like for thinking that it was going to work just by plugging the thing into the wall and using what little knowledge I had. How about you, Cuz?
Yeah, even you just saying it now, Justin, it wasn't funny to me. I was still, about to cry remembering that experience.
Yeah, I was more angry with myself. Like, you're an idiot, dude.
Yeah.
How did you think that was going to work?
Yeah. So I have a little segment called Quick Fire 5. 5 quick questions. You both can answer. Just like 1 to 2 word answer. Ready?
Sure.
Yeah.
All right. One of Sacred Vice's beers that you would recommend someone try.
Yeah. Northburg Pale Ale.
Okay.
I'd say our Life Party Porter.
All right. Favorite brewery other than your own?
Forest and Maine.
Trogs out in Harrisburg. That's probably my
good
favorite.
one, Cuz.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Trogs is good. Favorite style of beer?
Pale Ale. Oh, I don't know. What time of day is it? What day is it? What's
Say after work. If whichever job. Pick a job.
As strong a beer as I can find.
All right. Would that be
stiff wound?
All right. Barrel aged, imperial, or both?
Barrel aged.
Yeah, I'd go imperial.
Imperial.
Based off that last question?
Yeah. Last question. You have 1 keg of beer to hold you over for a 2-week quarantine. What beer are you choosing?
I'll take a barrel of Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
There you go.
I'd have to go with Tired Hands Alien Church.
Ooh, good choice.
I don't know if that, or what their latest, they have Punch. I'd go with Punch, a keg of Punch.
Keg of Punch. Sounds silly, but I'm sure it's delicious.
Yeah, no, it's probably, I don't know if it's a double or a single, but it's probably their Tired Hands, my favorite IPA from them.
Yeah, I need to make a trip up to Tired Hands. I've had some of their stuff, but not enough.
It's worth it, man.
Yeah.
They make good beer.
Well, Justin and Matt, that's all I have for you guys. Thank you so much for being with me, man. Appreciate
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, this was fun, Michael. Thanks for inviting us.
Not a problem. I'm Mike Curtin for the Brew World Order podcast, here with Justin and Matt from Sacred Vice. Have a good one. Hey guys, so that was my interview with Justin Steinberg and Matthew Brodsky of Sacred Vice Brewing Company in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to check them out if you're in Philly, passing through, or you just live in the area. Every other Sunday I'll be posting a new podcast, so stay tuned and like I said, subscribe, and you'll never miss another episode. Also, give us a follow on our social media accounts as well. Why not? I'm Mike Curtin for the Brew World Order podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and you stay safe out there.